My name is Mara Ellison, and I'm 36 years old. If you looked at my life from the outside 6 months ago, you'd probably say I had it all under control. I was a senior associate at an architecture firm in Chicago, specializing in sustainable commercial buildings. I made good money, had a decent reputation, and spent my days arguing about solar panel placement and energy codes with people who thought green design meant adding a plant in the lobby. Not glamorous, but solid, predictable, safe. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park with my boyfriend, fiancé, technically, Ethan Cole, 34. We'd been together for just over 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and we were at that stage of life where your weekends are less spontaneous adventure and more comparing Midwest wedding venues and arguing about whether you really need a donut wall. Our apartment was fine. Hardwood floors, tiny galley kitchen that realtors call cozy when they mean you will bump hips every time you try to cook. The rent was ridiculous, but this is Chicago. We split the bills evenly, used a shared calendar app to coordinate our schedules, and had a spreadsheet for everything from utilities to honeymoon options. At the time, I told myself the shared calendar was a sign of how organized we were as a couple. Looking back, it feels more like a warning label. If your relationship needs project management software to function, something else is probably broken. For context, I'd spent the last 8 years at the same firm, climbing my way up from overworked junior architect to the woman everyone called when a project was on fire. LEED certifications, daylight analysis, thermal performance. This was my language. I wasn't exactly the most exciting person at parties, but I showed up, did good work, and never missed a deadline. Ethan worked in digital marketing. He was a campaign director at a mid-sized agency downtown, the type who could read a room in 10 seconds and know exactly how to pitch. Charismatic, quick, always the best-dressed person in any meeting. If I was the quiet stability, he was the spark that made everything feel a little brighter. We met the way you meet people in your 30s when you've given up on dating apps, at a friend's housewarming party. It was late spring, one of those rare May evenings in Chicago when the weather decides to be kind. Our mutual friend Jeremy had just bought a fixer-upper in Wicker Park and filled it with mismatched furniture, too many people, and not enough glasses. I was standing near the makeshift bar, really just a cluttered kitchen counter, trying to decide which craft beer would offend my taste buds the least, when a voice behind me said, "If you're trying not to drink a pine tree, the normal stuff's in the fridge." I turned to see him. Dark hair, easy smile, that casual confidence of someone who's never had to wonder if they're welcome in a room. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only because you've been staring at that IPA for a full minute like it personally wronged you," he said. "I'm Ethan, by the way." We started talking. It was annoyingly effortless. He made jokes about pretentious cocktail culture. I admitted I secretly hated drinks that came with tasting notes. We mocked the playlist. We swapped stories about nightmare clients. Time blurred. By the end of the night, Jeremy found us still in the kitchen, the party thinning around us as if we'd accidentally built our own little bubble. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. He texted before I even got home. "This is Ethan from the party," just making sure I didn't hallucinate that conversation. "Also, I'm going to ask you out for coffee this week, so brace yourself." I smiled all the way up to my third-floor walk-up like an idiot. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends together. Within a year, he was spending more nights at my place than his. And when my lease came up, moving in together felt inevitable rather than dramatic. Somewhere along the way, we adopted a cat. His idea, not mine. A sleek gray menace named Miso that spent the first 6 months judging me from the back of the couch like I'd personally offended her by existing. Ethan thought it was hilarious. "She's just slow to warm up," he'd say as Miso stared at me like I owed her money. "She's a cat. Emotional withholding is kind of their brand." We built a life, a rhythm. I'd handle cooking most nights. He did grocery runs and laundry. We alternated cleaning duties. Sundays were for meal prepping, arguing about podcasts, and half-watching docuseries while we answered work emails we'd pretended we wouldn't check. The first year was good, better than good. We traveled a little, nothing extravagant, just long weekends to Milwaukee, Indianapolis, anywhere we could drive in 3 or 4 hours. We met each other's families. My parents in the suburbs adored him. He was charming, helpful in the kitchen, and remembered tiny details from conversations weeks ago. His parents, from a small town in Wisconsin, approved of me in that quiet way Midwestern parents do. Extra food on my plate, an extra blanket folded at the end of the guest bed. We talked about the future in that easy, half-joking, half-serious way, where we might want to buy a place. Whether kids were on the table, how many plants qualified as tasteful versus you live in a greenhouse now. He proposed on our 2-year anniversary. We were at his parents' lake house in early September, one of those clear evenings where the sky looks painted on. He'd led me down to the dock to see the sunset, which was suspicious but still sweet. The ring appeared. The speech happened. It wasn't over the top, it was simple, earnest. He told me I made his life better, that he couldn't imagine a future without me. I cried, I said yes. His parents brought out champagne. My mom started a Pinterest board before I'd even texted her a photo of the ring. We planned a summer wedding in Wisconsin. His mom knew someone who could get us a deal on a venue. Guest lists, DJ versus band, open bar, or limited selection. At the time, these decisions felt like high-stakes diplomacy. Now they feel like a tragic waste of mental energy. For a while, everything was fine, normal, maybe even boring in that way. Steady relationships are supposed to be. And then, like a hairline crack in concrete that's been there all along, little signs started showing. He'd get oddly defensive if I casually asked who he'd been texting during dinner. He'd make jokes about clingy girlfriends, even when I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. He'd roll his eyes and say, "God, Mara, you trust me or not?" over things that didn't feel like trust issues so much as basic information. I told myself I was overthinking it. I had a stressful job. We were planning a wedding. Of course I was anxious. That's what I do, right? Analyze, troubleshoot, find problems before they crack the structure. I should have listened to that part of myself. 3 months before everything fell apart, he mentioned running into his ex-girlfriend, Bianca, at a bar near his office. "Totally random," he said, breezy. "We just caught up for a bit. She's married now anyway. Real estate agent, lives in River North. Her husband's some finance guy, I think. No big deal." I nodded, filed it away, tried not to let the discomfort linger too long. Exes exist. Adults bump into people from their past. It doesn't have to mean anything, but sometimes it does. Fast forward to a work trip I had in Denver, a 3-day sustainability conference that sounded glamorous on paper and felt like death by PowerPoint in reality. On the second night, I was in my hotel room, half listening to the local news and half skimming building code updates on my laptop. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Ran into Bianca at Murphy's tonight. We got to talking and it's getting late, so I'm just going to crash at her place instead of coming home. You need to prove you're not the jealous, insecure type by being okay with this. Love you." I read it once, then again, then again. My brain did that thing where it tries to reject reality on a technicality. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe he meant a group of people. Maybe no. Bianca, the ex, the one who was now married, the one whose husband presumably existed and had opinions about overnight female guests. My first instinct was pure panic. Call him, demand to know what he was thinking, book the next flight back, storm into Bianca's place, drag him out by the collar. My second instinct was worse. I started wondering if I was being insecure. If this was some sort of modern, enlightened test, I was failing because I still believed engaged people don't sleep at their ex's place was a reasonable boundary. Then something inside me went very still. All the noise in my head compressed into one sharp, clear thought. He is telling you exactly who he is. And for once in my life, the architect in me didn't try to reinforce the crack. She just looked at it and said, "Oh, the structure's failing." I typed back, "Prove whatever you need to. We'll talk when I'm home tomorrow." Then I set my phone down, picked it back up, and did something I'm not even a little bit sorry for. I opened Instagram, found Bianca's profile, then clicked through to her husband, Ryan Marshall, a portfolio full of real estate posts and smiling couple photos. His business number was right there in his bio. Call anytime. So I did. And that was the moment the engagement ended, even though none of us quite knew it yet. When Ryan picked up, his voice was smooth and professional, the kind you hear in real estate ads. "Hi, this is Ryan Marshall." For a second, I almost hung up. I didn't know this man. I was about to drag him into a situation he didn't ask for late at night because my fiancé decided to turn our relationship into a social experiment. "Hi, Ryan," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Sorry to bother you so late. My name is Mara. I think you might know my fiancé's ex, Bianca." There was a tiny pause. I could hear his brain click through name, context, danger. Yeah, he said slowly. Bianca's my wife. What's going on? My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, but my voice came out oddly calm. I'm really sorry to call you out of nowhere, I said. I'm in Denver for work right now, and I just got a text from my fiancé, Ethan. He said he ran into Bianca at Murphy's tonight and that he's going to crash at her place instead of going home. He framed it as a test, for me, to prove I'm not jealous or insecure. Silence. No breathing. No what. No shocked exclamation. Just nothing. Ryan, I asked, you still there? Yeah, he said eventually. His voice had changed, cooler, tighter. Just making sure I heard that right. Ethan is staying at my wife's place tonight? That's what his text said, I answered. I wanted to check if this is something you knew about or were okay with. He laughed once, a short, humorless sound. I'm in Des Moines, he said, at my sister's. Bianca told me she was doing a girls' night with some coworkers. So no, Mara, I did not know Ethan would be having a sleepover at my condo with my wife. The words my wife landed like a gavel. My stomach flipped. I felt weirdly dizzy, even though I was sitting on crisp hotel sheets that smelled like bleach and generic citrus. I'm really sorry, I said. I didn't know what else to do. I thought... No, he cut in gently. You did the right thing. I appreciate you calling. There was a rustling sound on his end, like he'd stood up. Look, he continued, and his voice sharpened. Do you mind holding for a second? I'm going to add Bianca to this call. I blinked at the phone, stunned by how fast this had escalated. You don't have to. Oh, I absolutely do. He exhaled slowly. Hang on. I stared at my reflection in the black TV screen while I listened to the faint sound of movement through the receiver. A hotel AC unit hummed on low. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loudly. This was surreal. I was in Colorado, barefoot in an oversized conference hoodie, about to be dropped into a phone ambush with my fiancé and his ex and her husband. This wasn't my life. This was a script I'd be watching on someone else's drama channel. Mara, Ryan's voice came back closer, adding Bianca now. I heard the beeps of the phone merging calls. Then, hey Rye, what's up? Bianca's voice was bright, distracted. There was noise in the background. Music, chatter, the echoey sound of a bar. Ryan didn't waste time. Quick question, he said, tone razor sharp, but deceptively casual. Are you at our place right now? Silence. Not the kind where someone didn't hear you. The kind where someone is calculating. What? No, she said finally. I'm at Murphy's with some coworkers. Why? Interesting, Ryan said. Because I'm on the phone with a woman named Mara. She's Ethan's fiancée. Ethan just texted her saying he ran into you at Murphy's and that he's going to crash at your place tonight. He framed it as a test of how insecure she is. The background noise on her end seemed to dim, like she'd stepped away from the main crowd. That's not what I said, Bianca replied. Her voice went from bright to brittle in seconds. Ethan must have misunderstood. We were just talking about... Hey, Bianca, I cut in before I could lose my nerve. It's Mara. A beat, then. Oh, she said. That one syllable held a lot. Annoyance, surprise, something that sounded suspiciously like dread. Hi. I don't want to fight with you, I said. I just want the truth. Are you or are you not planning on him staying over at your place tonight? I could hear her inhale. We had a lot to drink, she said, switching strategies. The bar hum behind her was still there. We thought it'd be safer for him to crash on the couch instead of Ubering all the way back. It's not a big deal, Mara. We used to date, sure, but we're friends now. You don't have to freak out every time a woman is in the same apartment as your fiancé. The condescension in her voice lit something up in me. Ryan's tone went arctic. Bianca, he said quietly, you told me you were out with coworkers. You did not mention Ethan. You did not mention him staying over at our place. You also didn't mention that you apparently view my home as a crash pad for your exes. It's not like that, she snapped. You always overreact. I was going to tell you. When? He shot back. Before or after he slept on our couch? Or were you hoping I just wouldn't check the security app tonight? A cold little shiver ran through me. Security app? I echoed. Ryan didn't hesitate. Yeah. The one that shows when our front door opens, he said flatly. I got an alert 20 minutes ago. So unless my condo has learned how to let itself out for a walk, someone went inside. You want to try that explanation again, Bea? Bianca went completely silent. I could actually hear the dull thump of my own pulse in my ears. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Okay, fine. I told Ethan he could crash. So what? Nothing was going to happen. He's engaged, I'm married, we're adults. I just wanted to catch up with an old friend and not be policed for once. Ryan's composure cracked for just a second. By lying to your husband, he said, and turning another woman's engagement into a personality quiz. It was just a test, she insisted. If Mara trusted him, she wouldn't have an issue with it. It's about her insecurity, not us. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out sharp and slightly hysterical. Okay, I said. Let me see if I've got this straight. You and Ethan, who used to date, decide he should spend the night at your place. You don't tell your husband you invited your ex over. You send me a text at nearly midnight announcing this big sleepover as a test of whether I'm insecure. And the conclusion you landed on is that I'm the problem? Bianca bristled. You're twisting it. Ryan cut in before she could keep going. No, he said. She's summarizing. Big difference. No one spoke for a moment. Then Ryan took a breath, and his voice went calm in a way that was somehow worse than anger. Here's what's going to happen, he said. Bianca, you're going to go home, alone. Ethan can find his way to his own apartment or a hotel or the nearest gutter for all I care. I'm going to log back into our security system and see who goes in and out of our front door tonight. And Mara? Yes, I said, throat tight. You don't owe that man another conversation, Ryan said. Not after this. You don't owe him a debate or a chance to spin this or a TED Talk about insecurity. You already passed the only test that matters. You believed what his actions told you. A strange, fierce gratitude burned behind my eyes. Thank you, I managed. Bianca exploded then, voice rising, accusing both of us of conspiring against her, calling me dramatic and Ryan controlling. He let her rant for a minute and then ended the call with a clipped, "We'll talk when you're home." The line went dead. For a moment, my hotel room was absolutely silent. I stared at my phone, at the blank call screen, at my own reflection reflected in the glass. Messy bun, conference lanyard still around my neck, eyes too bright. Then I opened my messages with Ethan. Just talked to Ryan. He didn't know about your test. You and I are done. I'll be back tomorrow to get my things. I watched the 3 dots appear, vanish, reappear. Mara, babe, you're overreacting. Nothing even happened. It was a joke. You're failing it. Call me. We need to talk about why you're so threatened by other women. I blocked his number. Then I sat back on the bed, phone face down beside me, and realized I felt lighter. Not happy. Not okay. But like someone had cut a weight off my chest that I'd been pretending wasn't there. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next afternoon, I was back in Chicago. My flight landed around 2 p.m., and I dragged my carry-on straight to our apartment like I was walking into a crime scene. The sky was that dull gray Chicago specializes in. Too bright to be cozy, too flat to be dramatic. Perfect, really. Ethan was waiting inside. He must have been pacing because when I opened the door, he spun around so fast miso shot under the couch like a furry missile. Mara, he said, relief flooding his face. Thank God. We need to talk. No, I said, pulling my suitcase in. I need to pack. I brushed past him into the bedroom. He followed, sputtering. Come on, this is insane, he said. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. Nothing happened, okay? Bianca was drunk. She overreacted. Ryan's possessive. You made it into this huge... You texted me at 11:42 p.m., I said calmly, pulling open drawers and tossing clothes into the open suitcase on the bed. Telling me you were staying at your ex's place as a test of my insecurity. He rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes. It was a joke, he insisted. An edgy one, sure, but still. You know my sense of humor. I was just trying to show you that you have trust issues. If you really believed I loved you, this wouldn't bother you. I stopped, one hand resting on my stack of folded t-shirts, and looked at him. If I believed you loved me, I said slowly, you wouldn't have needed to stage a loyalty exam in your ex's living room. He groaned. You sound just like Ryan. I can't believe that guy actually added me to a call in front of you. Do you know how humiliating that was? He made me look like some cheating... Nobody made you look like anything, I cut in. You did that all by yourself. He stared at me, stunned into silence. I turned back to the dresser. Sweaters, socks, the robe I never wore. It felt mechanical, like I was packing up someone else's life. Mara, can you just stop for 2 seconds? His voice cracked on the last word, panic finally creeping in. We're engaged. We've built a life. You're really going to throw that away over one night that didn't even happen? I zipped the suitcase halfway and finally faced him fully. This isn't about one night, I said. It's about months of little comments, about you making me feel like I was crazy anytime I questioned something, about you deciding to use your ex and her marriage as props in an experiment to measure how much humiliation I'd swallow in the name of being chill. His jaw clenched. So that's it? You're just done? Yes, I said, I am. He laughed once in disbelief, then shook his head. You're going to regret this, he said. You'll be alone in some studio apartment with your plants, and you'll think about the fact that you destroyed your own engagement because you couldn't handle a joke. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll know exactly who I'm waking up next to. I finished zipping the suitcase. The sound was absurdly loud. On my way out, I bent down and scratched Miso behind the ears. For the first time in months, she didn't recoil. She pressed into my hand, eyes half closed, like she knew something was shifting. Traitor, Ethan muttered at the cat. I straightened, picked up my suitcase handle, and walked past him. I didn't slam the door behind me. I just closed it, softly, permanently. In the elevator, watching the floors tick down, it hit me that I hadn't planned anything beyond this moment. No new apartment, no timeline, nothing. I had a suitcase, a duffel with my laptop, and a sudden, terrifying freedom. It was messy, it was expensive, it was going to hurt, but it was mine. I moved into a sublet the very next day, a cramped little studio owned by a friend of a friend who was traveling abroad, cluttered with succulents and abandoned textbooks. It smelled faintly of eucalyptus and dust, but it felt like the first space in months that didn't judge me. The lease situation hit next. Breaking the contract at the old apartment was a bureaucratic nightmare. Forms, penalties, 60 days notice. When the property manager casually informed me the early termination fee would be $3,600, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my life was becoming one long joke I hadn't agreed to be part of. Friends reacted predictably. The people who actually knew me said things like, "You did the right thing. Nobody sane tests their fiancé like that." And the people who wanted to avoid rocking the social boat said, "I mean, nothing happened, right? Maybe you two could talk it out." I stopped replying to those messages. "Mara," he said, "you're billing too many hours." "I like being productive," I answered. "You'll burn out." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll burn out efficiently." He didn't laugh. 3 weeks after the breakup, Lila cornered me at a bar after work. She looked like she was bracing for impact. "You okay to hear something?" she asked. "Probably not," I said. "Tell me anyway." "I saw Bianca," she said. "She didn't see me, and she was talking really loudly." My throat tightened. "About what?" "About Ethan. About you." Lila hesitated. "She said you failed the insecurity test spectacularly, like she was proud of it, and they've been meeting up for weeks at Murphy's, regularly." The world didn't shatter. It just rearranged itself into a shape that finally made sense. "Oh," I said quietly. "So it was planned." Lila nodded. "I'm so sorry." I wasn't, because clarity, even painful clarity, is a gift. 2 months later, clarity crashed into my inbox. An email from Ryan. Subject line, "Thought you should see this." I opened it immediately. Screenshots, text messages, not from that night, from months earlier, back during our engagement when I was choosing color palettes for wedding invitations. Bianca, still on for tomorrow night? R is at her mom's. Ethan, definitely. Mara's at that work dinner, so I'm all yours. Bianca, same arrangement as last time? Ethan, perfect. Don't forget what we talked about. Bianca, already packed. Can't wait. My heart didn't break. It just stopped trying to make excuses. Ryan's note below the screenshot read, "Found these during divorce proceedings. There are more. You weren't wrong. I'm sorry." I typed back, "Thank you. And I'm sorry you're dealing with this too." A day passed. Then another email arrived. "If you ever want to talk, no pressure. Just thought it might help to speak with someone who understands." So I said yes. We met at a cafe tucked between a boutique gym and a bookstore. He was already there, hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. He looked tired, but in a clean, honest way, not the kind of exhaustion that hides behind charm. "Hey," he said. "Hi." We talked about the texts, the lies, the humiliation, the weirdness of having our lives implode in parallel. There were moments when we laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity was too much to hold without letting something out. 3 hours passed before either of us checked the time. He walked me to the train station. The evening breeze was cold, but lighter than anything I'd felt in months. "I'm glad you called that night," he said quietly. "So am I." We left without exchanging numbers. But I thought about him afterward, in quiet moments, when my apartment felt too small or too silent. A month later, I found him standing in the architecture aisle at a downtown bookstore, staring at a sustainable design manual like it held the secrets of the universe. "Ryan?" I called. He turned, startled, then smiled. "Mara? Wow, small world." We talked for 15 minutes. Nothing heavy, nothing sharp-edged, just two people surprised they weren't uncomfortable. 2 weeks later, we bumped into each other again, this time at the farmer's market. I was buying tomatoes. He was comparing loaves of artisanal bread like it mattered. He grinned. "Are we doing that thing where we keep running into each other until one of us admits we're hoping to?" I laughed so hard the tomatoes rolled out of my bag. Maybe we were. We exchanged numbers, under the shade of a stall selling local honey. Just a quiet, mutual decision that maybe healing didn't have to be something done entirely alone. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend we weren't both bruised. We just walked forward carefully. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like stepping into sunlight. We didn't rush into anything after that. Our messages were sporadic. Sometimes a meme, sometimes an article, sometimes a simple, rough day. Hope yours wasn't. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. Just two people easing into each other's orbit. But even soft gravity can pull. One Saturday morning, Ryan texted, "Coffee, no expectations, just caffeine and daylight." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Yes." We met at a cafe near my new apartment. Small, warm, the kind of place where the baristas know your order before you open your mouth. He was sitting at the back table, head bent over his phone, hair still damp like he'd rushed to get there. When he saw me, that tired, easy smile spread across his face. "You came," he said. "Obviously," I replied, trying not to sound too relieved. The conversation wasn't like last time. It wasn't about wounds or betrayal or piecing together the timelines of two imploded relationships. We talked about his work, my latest project, the Chicago winter, the bizarrely pretentious dog names we overheard from the next table. Somewhere between my second coffee and his third, he said quietly, "You seem lighter." "I feel lighter," I said. Through the window, a couple walked past, arguing about something trivial. It used to make my throat tighten to see other couples. Now it just felt like watching strangers in a movie I wasn't part of anymore. Ryan leaned back, studying me. I'm glad. We didn't touch hands, didn't flirt, didn't lean forward the way people do when they're trying to create tension. It was steady, safe, like we were still figuring out whether this was the start of something or just a peaceful pause between storms. When we parted, he said, "Text me when you get home, so I know you didn't get kidnapped." I raised a brow. "Kidnapping? Really? In daylight?" "You'd be surprised," he said. "Chicago's wild." I did text him. Home, not kidnapped. He replied, "Good. I'd have to fill out a police report and I hate paperwork." I laughed for the rest of the night. The slow warmth of something new was beginning, barely noticeable at first. The kind that doesn't make promises. It just makes space. A few weeks later, the universe, or Chicago's strangely small social map, kept pushing us together. I saw him at Target, holding a hairdryer and looking confused. "Buying for yourself?" I asked. He stared at the thing like it was a bomb. "This model says ionic. I don't know what that means." "Static reduction," I said, "unless it's lying." I don't know if it was the lighting or the red shopping carts or the fact that we were both holding mundane household items, but something in that moment shifted. Not romantic, just possible. We stood there talking in the middle of an aisle, surrounded by shampoo bottles and overpriced serums. It was mundane in the most comforting way. "We should hang out properly," he said after a moment. "Not bookstore accident or farmer's market reunion or hairdryer therapy session." I smirked. "Properly? Wow, are we establishing terms?" "I'm trying," he said. "Badly, but I'm trying." So we made plans. Lunch, then coffee again, then a walk along the river when the weather finally thawed. Every time I felt myself unclench a little more. Every time he seemed less like the man who came into my life through betrayal, and more like the man who showed me what steadiness felt like. Then one night, just as things were starting to feel real, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. A text popped up. "So it's true. You and Ryan? Pathetic. The betrayed couple clinging to each other? Guess you're not as emotionally evolved as you pretend." It was Ethan. Of course it was. I stared at the message in disbelief. Months of silence, and this was the contact he chose to resurrect? I sent it to Ryan without comment. He called immediately. "That's her projecting," he said simply. It was him, I corrected. There was a pause. Then Ryan sighed. Of course it was. What do I even do with a message like that? I asked. You do nothing, he said. We're not defined by the people who betrayed us. We're defined by what we do after. I closed my eyes. I hate that he still thinks he gets a say in my life. He doesn't, Ryan said softly. Not unless you let him. Something inside me, something that had been pulled tight for months, finally loosened. Thank you, I whispered. Always, he said. Months passed. We kept moving forward, carefully, slowly, neither of us rushing to call this a relationship or give it a name. But the truth was simple. We were building something, quietly, deliberately, honestly. One evening in early spring, we were walking back from dinner. The air was still cold enough to bite, but the city lights made everything feel alive again. Ryan slowed his steps and looked over at me. Can I ask you something? I nodded. When you think about the future now, does it scare you less? I breathed out, watching the fog of my breath drift into the night. Yes, I said, it scares me less with you. His shoulders relaxed as if he'd been holding something in. Good, he murmured, because it scares me less with you, too. He didn't reach for my hand, but I reached for his, and this time he didn't hesitate. Spring crept into the city in small, stubborn ways. Tiny green buds on the branches, the first dog walkers without heavy coats, patios reopening even though it was still too cold to sit outside. Life didn't suddenly become magical or perfect, but it became softer, easier. Ryan and I kept meeting for coffee, for walks, for quiet dinners that never tried too hard to be anything other than what they were. There was no pressure, no unspoken expectations. Just two people choosing, day after day, to show up. One evening, we were sitting on a bench near the river, watching the lights ripple over the water. He was telling me a story about a disastrous open house he had attended with his sister years ago. I wasn't even listening to the details. I was watching the way he talked with his whole face, the way his hands moved when he told a story, the softness that had grown over him these past months. I didn't know when it happened, but at some point, I stopped feeling like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I stopped listening for lies in every sentence, stopped anticipating betrayal like it was a season I just had to survive. I stopped bracing. And I didn't realize how profound that was until I caught myself smiling without thinking about it. Ryan noticed. What? He asked. You're funny, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Funny how? In a non-harmful way, I replied. It's refreshing. He pressed a hand dramatically to his chest. I strive to be refreshing. We sat for a while, letting the wind move between us, like another presence. Then he said softly, Mara, can I ask you something? I turned to him. Always. How do you trust someone again, after everything? I exhaled slowly. His question wasn't directed at me. It was directed inward, toward the part of him still carrying the knowledge that someone he promised a future to had been secretly building a different one behind his back. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think you don't do it all at once. You do it in small pieces, like letting someone know what you're afraid of, or telling them when something hurts instead of pretending it doesn't. His gaze lowered to the river. And what if you mess up? You will, I said. So will I. Probably often. The point isn't perfection. The point is whether we show up after the mess. A quiet, grateful smile spread across his face. He nodded, as if he'd been waiting for someone to say that out loud. We didn't talk about Ethan or Bianca anymore, except in passing. They existed now like old scars, visible if you looked closely but no longer bleeding. Still, sometimes things leaked through the cracks. One night, while we were watching a documentary on his couch, half listening, half dozing, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then set it face down without reacting. Everything okay? I asked. He hesitated for a beat, then said calmly, Bianca wants to talk. A ghost, a shadow, an echo. What did she say? That she wants closure. He exhaled. I don't. I nodded. You don't owe her anything. He turned to me then, eyes soft in the dim light. I don't want to go back to that life, he said. Not even to say goodbye. You won't, I said quietly. He nodded. Then, almost shyly, he offered me his hand again. I took it. It was the most untraumatic moment I'd experienced in years. A few days later, I found myself sorting through a box I hadn't touched since the breakup. Old journals, a pair of heels I hated, a stack of engagement party cards full of well wishes that now felt like postcards from a different reality. At the bottom was a thick envelope I didn't recognize. Inside were the printed itineraries for the wedding we never had, the one Ethan had pretended to care about planning, even while sneaking messages to someone else. For a moment, I let myself feel the smallest version of grief. Quiet, contained, honest. The grief of who I used to be, not the grief of losing him. Then I put the whole stack back in the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it in the trash. Not out of anger, out of closure. Real closure. My closure. A week later, Ryan and I were at the farmer's market again, sampling strawberries that weren't quite in season. The air smelled like honey and new beginnings. People milled around us. Families, couples, dogs tugging on leashes. He handed me a strawberry half. "What do you think?" he asked. I took a bite. "Good. A little sour." "Same," he said. We both reached for another sample at the same time, and our hands brushed. He paused, looking down at where our fingers met, then up at me. There was something quietly certain in his eyes, something steady. "Can I take you out?" he asked. Like, intentionally. Not coffee, not accidental bookstores or fruit stands. A real date. A warmth bloomed in my chest. Not fast, not fiery, gentle. "Yes," I said. He smiled, slow and sincere, as if the world had tilted just the right amount for once. "Okay," he murmured. "Good." He took my hand again. This time it wasn't cautious. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't a test or a replacement or a bandage for an old wound. It was simply two people choosing to walk forward hand in hand, knowing exactly where they came from, and still deciding to try.